Hey and welcome to Neverwinter with Aragon. So I just want to cover some companion tests for multi-target damage. This will include the new Diana the Acrobat, the Dark Dealer, which many have suggested that it might also have gotten buffed when Xuna's ability Bloodbath got buffed, as they have that same thing there. We will also cover Xuna, as she did get updated with module 29 and we haven't gone and tested her since. And then, yes, also the Shadar-kai Witch, which supposedly got fixed and basically nerfed with her Grasp of Shadows ability. I then went and retested a bunch of the very good ones like Wolfgar, Regis, Minsk, Minotaur, etc. So let's dive into my test results. First of all, how are they tested? Well, we go to the first group of ads in the Kessel's Retreat skirmish. This allows the companion to have 5 targets that they can hit all together, and it will depend on the area of their abilities whether they can do so or not. We try to position ourselves close to the companion and orientated so we're not granting combat advantage to our companion, because if we did so it would just end up a lot more of a struggle to try and do that for every companion, and therefore the more simple solution is to just try and have it without combat advantage. That way we get a solid baseline, and if the companion has such abilities to, say, position deliberately behind an enemy to do an attack, then they will do so, although I found none of them actually have that. And in general, the worst ones are the ones that are going to be ranged. For example, you find that with the Shadar-kai Witch, the enemies are going to try and move close to her, and then she's always going to have to try and reposition further away. So there's an awful lot of moving there. And I guess this test does then more favor the melee multi-target companions, and I think in a real combat scenario that is also fair. The reason we're having this kind of a test versus, say, a full fight with lots of players is to cut down on variables. If we have so many different things that can change based on when a player uses their ability, when some other companions use their ability, when is somebody using their daily power, when are they not, with too many variables, you end up with very inconsistent tests where a companion can do very well in this run and then poorly in another run, and you might really not know why, and it could just be due to this player got to the enemies first and killed them before your companion could, and then on the other run the companion got there first and could use their power quickly. We're trying to cut down on these inconsistencies, and here we give them a chance just to beat up these 5 targets as quickly as possible. My role here again is to position, so I give them as little combat advantage bonus as possible, usually just standing right next to the companion, and then they'll do their thing. I use banishment here just to disable the enemies so they aren't doing so much damage, and otherwise we keep the companion healed. And that is the baseline for my test and the reasoning why I find this is probably a more fair multi-target test than I have done in the past. And yes, of course, it can depend on content, because some companions can be better when they just do a big hit at the very beginning and then it doesn't really matter what else they do. And that is particularly why I would say a companion like the Minotaur Mercenary is in general going to be better than any of these here, just because of the benefit of grouping up enemies, allowing you as the player to actually deal more damage against the enemies easier, because when they're all grouped up, all of your powers are going to hit them. I would generally rate that as a lot more valuable than just a companion which may perform a bit better than others in, say, a true multi-target fight. But overall, let's jump to our results, and this is what we found with our testing. So we're just looking at DPS, which is average damage per second over the duration of their fight. So I leave this to just go all the way until they kill all 5 of the enemies. So some are going to be good at damaging all of them together, some will have a bit more single target, and so they might take a bit longer, and so there's a balance, and we ultimately end up with this. But you have to be very aware of like the radius of the enemy's effects. For example, Minsk and Wolfgar can do great because they can generally hit everything that is near them. But as soon as enemies are a bit further than, like, say 15 feet, you'll find that their damage will fall off significantly compared to something that I have a bit further range. Regis is like 25 foot range. Minotaur Mercenary is 50 foot ranged. These ones are always guaranteed to affect enemies that are much more spread out, and you're not always going to find a fight where they're close together. So there's still so many different variables that will affect this, and you have to keep in mind of that. But as per this test, this is the results we were getting with those companions. And we now need to add in the Shadar-kai Witch, Xuna, Dark Dealer, Diana the Acrobat. The rest of these I had shown before, and they're basically similar rankings. We have gone and retested some of those, particularly the top like 8 here. Now Xuna has definitely been improved, and we see that here with her DPS going up to like 12,724, and that'll put her ranked at like 5th position there out of these. So she's fairly solid, and to be honest, she's also very good in single target, which means you could just use her everywhere and not worry about switching between different companions. But we then go to the Shadar-kai Witch, and her damage against multiple targets has been pretty much gutted. She is pretty awful now, at least compared to all these. Only just above 5,000 DPS. Yeah, she got a massive nerf in module 29 because, again, her grasp of shadows can only hit one target now, so you're only going to get one hand coming up and hitting multiple guys, versus was before you could have one hand per target, meaning you had a lot of overlap if enemies were grouped up, and she could do an absolute ton of damage. She is now just completely nerfed to a state where I would not use her anymore. If the devs wanted to improve her, it would be to increase the radius, the area of effect of her grasp of shadows. It's currently just too tiny to be very effective. On top of that, one of her abilities got broken, and this is where she summons this orb, and it now deals 0 damage. So devs, could you kindly fix that and potentially improve her damage output a bit with the area of that hand? Because she's now performing super poorly. Not a companion I would use in multi-target at all. Maybe in some situations where you want a knock-up effect in, say, a single target fight. In multi-target, you're always just going to be better off for crowd control, using something like the Intellect Devour for the 4-second stun duration, or again, the Minotaur with its Tidal Force to group up enemies, which also stuns the enemies for like 3 seconds. But then we go to the Dark Dealer, who again has the exact same bloodbath ability as you see with Xuna. However, she was no way at all affected with the change to Xuna. She still performs very poorly, basically where Xuna was at before she got buffed. Hopefully the devs can be aware of that and actually improve her to the level near enough to Xuna. Dark Dealer also has even a bit less multi-target damage because Xuna has her Envenomed Blades, which can do area damage, versus the Dark Dealer doesn't have that. Just going to do more raw damage herself, but it's far less effective, and I would just, again, increase her damage, improve it, and put her in line with Xuna, please. Finally, here we have Diana the Acrobat, the new companion with this module's lockbox, and she's just at that like 7,627 DPS, so she's also not great. She's very nice to use just to give you a bunch of movement speed, but in terms of dealing damage, nah. And again, yes, you could take this test and go and say Regis is the best, followed by Minsk, Wolfgar, but I would ultimately say Minotaur Mercenary is just always going to be super good, even if his damage is not like the maximum best. Just that grouping up effect is huge. We can see that here. We have our 5 enemies, we go into combat, and he immediately starts pulling them all in, CCing them, they won't attack, and then he can start spinning and dealing all that damage in his area of effect. And he's just super reliable with, again, having a very generous range on his area, which pulls enemies together, and then controlling them for that bit, and just overall having some pretty solid damage. I absolutely rate him as the best, just as overall for the companion and his abilities. But yeah, like Minsk, he's very viable in multi-target, and he's going to be a companion that probably most damage dealers have, because you want to have him for the defensive ability. The bigger they are, giving extra damage in those boss fights. But again, he does require enemies to be pretty well grouped up in order to actually hit them all. Like that attack, pretty nice all around him, but then this sword attack requires them to be within that range of him for him to actually hit them and output that damage. And if he can hit everybody, he can do very, very well. And it also requires him to be in the fight for quite a while, versus some other companions, they're going to be more burst orientated. They're going to deal the damage at the very beginning, then do a bit of damage, and then have that power come off cooldown and use it again. Some fights, depending how long they last, can be more favorable to like a burst damaging companion. Xuna is going to use her bloodbath right from the beginning, on top of the fact that she's like not damageable during it. So she's super reliable in that regard. So again, there's lots of variables, lots of different multi-target companions you can use, and overall I wouldn't invest much in a multi-target companion. I say it time and time again, it is not very important. Yes, I do suggest the Minotaur Mercenary as like pretty much the best out there, but he even still is not a must-have. The damage is not a lot. The grouping up effect is not a must-have. Most enemies will come to you anyway just to attack you. It's only those annoying ranged ones that can be a bit problematic, trying to keep their distance being spread out. And he will help with that, but you can use other abilities to help with that. Overall, Shadar-kai Witch absolutely gutted, nerfed to the ground these days. Not one to use anymore, which is unfortunate, but nobody can really get her anymore, so whatever. I guess she had her time, but I still would like to see the devs improve her a bit more from how she is. As for the Dark Dealer, also would like to see her getting improved to the level of Xuna, as that would kind of only be fair as they have basically the same abilities. But once again, thanks for watching. A special thank you to all of these channel members, and we'll see you guys around. Goodbye for now.